Hi, Fiona. Thanks so much for joining me today.
It's good to be here, Micaela.
So, Fiona, you've been with the National Disability Services, NDS, for the past 3 years. You've been the state manager in Victoria for the last 12 months, and today's your second last day.
Yes, it's been a real whirlwind time to be at NDS through transition into the NDIS operating environment, and now with COVID-19. It's been a really interesting but challenging time.
Yeah, what a ride. Prior to that, you had 16 years at Solve Disability Solutions. So you've got a real expertise as an occupational therapist in assistive technology. And one of the roles you've held is being on the Australian Standards Committee around assistive technology. So that's my first question, really. I'm curious, as you leave this sector-wide role and go back into leading it at another organisation around assistive technology, what is it you brought to that role, do you think, in terms of your professional frameworks as an occupational therapist in what you've seen in a broader sector-wide role in terms of your leadership?
I think one of the things, and picking up on that assistive technology, in my very first lecture when it was around equipment as an OT student, we had a very wise woman say that people will be either independent with aids and equipment or dependent on aids and equipment. And that has really stayed with me. And I think it stayed with me in all my roles in terms of it's really important to look at what you're doing and how it impacts the people that you're supporting. And that, there is so much in assistive technology, those aids and equipment that can really assist people, but there are other people who don't want to have that, and it's informed my practice as an occupational therapist, but also my practice as a leader, in that it's really important to work out how your information and advice or leadership is going to land with people, and really looking at what makes people tick and being able to work with that and really in their frame of reference. If you're actually going to get outcomes that people can own and they want to do, it's not that imposing, really looking at where people are at, and that's where you can have the biggest impact.
I think one of my observations, because it's been such a pleasure working with you, Fiona, and it's one of the things that's been really refreshing about what I've observed about the approach you take, is it's very solution focused, pragmatic and collaborative. You've got a naturally collaborative style. There's been a lot of talk about the need with COVID. So what you've seen in terms of COVID and the changes in the way people have worked, you and I have talked over time about collaboration and the way it works or it doesn't work, and what you're seeing in terms of the way that has worked in response to COVID and the pandemic in the last period.
One of the things that I want to just pick up on is that collaboration first. That's really important. So I am a very practical person. I like to solve problems, like to get things done. But, as you get older and wiser, that you realise that people have different ways of looking at the world and they can get to a solution. It might not be your solution, but the important thing is that it's a solution. So from being a very young green, and I am an extrovert, absolute extrovert, having to step back and say it doesn't actually matter if it's my solution. It's my role as a leader is to get the problem solved. And I think that's something that really, as I've got a bit older and wiser, has really helped me. And that's really helped in this situation in COVID, is around that collaboration. And I think it's been very challenging for the Australian population that, we haven't seen anything like the health crisis that COVID-19 presents. And we've had a lot of change on our everyday freedoms, things that we've taken for granted. And in disability, it has really impacted on the way we provide services and support to people with disability. And I've really seen my role is working in conjunction with the sector to see how we can best support people with disability and to understand that within the frame of reference of the health implications and the restrictions that have been placed on Victorians because of the health crisis. And really being able to manage that. So one of the things for me that was really important early on was helping the sector to look at, the services that we provide are essential. They're fabulous. They're really great. But what's essential in a health crisis? What's essential to maintaining life and really minimising risk to the health and safety of the people that we support, but also the people that are doing that work as well, and really being able to help the sector to reframe those things, but also to look at what are some other creative solutions that you can still provide support, but it might not be the same as you were doing pre-COVID-19. And I think that's been where I've really tried to pitch what I've done and really to work with the sector, but also to look at, are there things that are coming out from DHHS that put additional restrictions on people with disability that other people don't have, and to make sure that there is a proportionate response to that health crisis in those directions for the sector.
So Fiona, you've seen an awful lot of change. You've talked about the degree of transitioning that's been going on over the 3 years that you've been with NDS, but the last 12 months as State Director. What's the one thing as we think about moving to whatever the next phase looks like, and I'm not very comfortable calling it recovery. I think particularly today and being in Victoria, none of us are really talking about recovery. I think there's some incredible opportunities around transitioning to something new. What's one of the things that you'd like to see us hold on to? What's the kind of parting bit of advice for the sector?
Well, I think it really has. There's been a lot of things that COVID has had a reset, or it's been a fast track for a lot of things. So it's a matter of being able to look at what are the learnings, what are the stories, what has been the success in amongst what has been very trying, and there has been just, we've developed things on the run, we've tried things, we've reviewed them, and new things have happened, is to look at what were the good outcomes for that. And so as an example, one of the things that we predicted at the beginning of COVID-19 and the lockdowns was, when it was the stay-at-home directions, was that we would perhaps see an increase in behaviours of concern for people who were at home and they weren't doing their usual routines. And on the whole, we've actually seen the opposite. And what we've learnt is that for some people, it was that actual push to be out the door at 9 o'clock. And everyone coming home tired and cranky after a day that may have been great, but, they're just tired and cranky and everyone comes home at the same time, that those 2 times of the day where we were seeing that people had behaviours of concern. So what are the things that we can learn from it? Is there a way with the National Disability Insurance Scheme that's really person-centred to be able to look at different supports, different times of day? Another wonderful story about a provider who used to do some groups around skill development and cooking, but in reflection they were more largely a social group. There was food involved. They're now doing cooking groups via Zoom, where people are given a list of ingredients. They have to go and be able to find them and have those ready for the cooking group. But the cooking group starts at 5 o'clock. And at the end of that session that the person has been very actively involved in, has assistance via Zoom, they have a meal that they can share with their family. And it's done at a time that suits that activity. It's a normal time to getting ready to prepare food and to have that for your family. So I think we're learning lots about different ways of providing services, looking at the timing of those services and really tailoring. I think the other thing is that we've looked at some really, and what we need to consolidate is what are we learning about telepractice. So we have identified that there are gaps in terms of behaviour support or therapy services in regional areas. So what are the things that we've learnt about using Zoom and other, video conferencing facilities to provide services? What are the good things? What are things that we still need to do face-to-face, but how we can balance that, but ensure people who may not have had access to those services can continue to have access to services.
That's a fantastic story. I love the one about being ready to have a meal that they can share. It's really interesting hearing the wisdom that you're bringing to that role and the very practical, pragmatic. So, Fiona, on behalf of many people who I know have deeply valued working with you in this role, I really want to say thank you. Thank you for what you have brought to it. It's been a breath of fresh air working with you, and you've modelled really good collaboration and pragmatic. How do we get problem solved, not necessarily with the solution that we came up with initially. So thanks very much for your time today, and all the best of luck with your next venture.
And you too, Micaela. It's been wonderful working with you, because it is, what we can achieve as a group is far better as individuals. And I think that that's something that hopefully, as we move through COVID, we find a new normal, that's what we retain also, is just that connections and using each other's strengths.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks.